It is 6:07 p.m. I'm calling to order a City of Emeryville Emory Unified School District special meeting. Please call the roll.
Mayor Medina.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Here.
Councilmember Bowders is absent. Councilmember Donahue.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez. Vice President Collins.
Present.
Member Donaldson.
Here.
Member Wen.
Yes.
Member Salazar.
Here.
And Member Vargas.
Here.
Any public comment for items not on this agenda? The public all work in polling, so probably not. Okay. All right, are we ready to start with 4.1? Come on up.
Wonderful. Hello, good evening. I'm Andy Morehouse. I'm here representing EMC Research.
Yes.
Members of the council, the board, welcome. Thank you for having me. Is this good? Can you
That's much
hear
better,
me?
thank you.
Perfect. I'm here today to speak to some high key findings that we had from a recent survey in the community, testing the potential feasibility of a parcel tax measure for the school district. So just a quick note on methodology. We were in the field collecting data, conducting interviews back in August. We had 251 interviews completed overall, and at a 90% confidence interval, that gives us a plus or minus 6.2 percentage point on the margin of error. So all the numbers that you see throughout the report, you can imagine a little plus or minus 6 points above and below. This was a mixed mode survey, so we contacted voters in the community both by live telephone interview, email invitation to complete online, and text message invitation to complete online as well. So we tested this parcel tax for the school district, a 12 cents per square foot parcel tax for 9 years. You see here on the left-hand side in the gray box the 75-word statement: to recruit, retain qualified, experienced teachers, maintain outstanding core academic programs and student achievement in reading, writing, math, science, and art, prepare students with skills for college and 21st century careers, and maintain classroom technology. So Emory Unified School District measure to levy an education parcel tax at 12 cents per square foot of building area for 9 years, raising $1.8 million annually with senior exemptions, citizen oversight, no funds for administrator salaries, and all funds benefiting Emory Unified School District be adopted. We see that support tested today at a solid 74% responding yes. I will vote yes on this measure. If it was on the ballot today, we had an additional 2% that were initially undecided, but when prompted, do you lean towards supporting yes or lean towards supporting no, they said that they lean towards supporting yes. So we have a total of 77% in support of the measure. The numbers here don't quite add up because rounding with some decimal support as well. We had 20% responding no and an additional 3% undecided. So as you can see, very strong support in the community for this parcel tax today. Many cite support for this parcel tax based on their feelings of importance in investing in education and kids, really perceiving that the schools need additional funding, general sentiment around schools really benefiting and improving the community, also some citing support for increases to teachers' salaries, and just general positive comments such as, I generally always support measures for the school. Education is good, I want to support education, etc. So we also presented to respondents a series of different programs that could be potentially included in a parcel tax measure. We presented these randomly. I have them ranked here in order of total importance with respondents on 2 slides. You see really rising to the top, recruiting and retaining qualified and experienced teachers, supporting the health and well-being of all students, maintaining outstanding core academic programs, reading, writing, math, science, and art. So really the major functions of the parcel tax, the potential parcel tax, really rising to the top in terms of priorities in the community. And you can see many of the programs that could be associated with the parcel tax have wide support, are high priorities for voters in the community as well. This is a continuation of the previous list of programs. You see that there's wide support here, maybe a little bit less intensity. Really everything rising above 70% in terms of total importance. Only one really falling to the bottom in terms of priorities relative to voters in the community, and that being maintaining student-athlete programs. But still supported by over a majority. After presenting some more detailed information about the potential benefits and outcomes of a successful parcel tax measure, we asked again, now having heard all this additional information, how would you vote today, given what you've heard or read? And we see support increase here from a total of 77% to 82%. So there is a little bit of solidification in that support after additional information. Again, widely supported in the community. We wanted to look at any potential differences between a March electorate versus a November electorate as well. And we see that support statistically here, speaking, is the same between the two different potential electorates. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have one. What was the negative messaging that you provided?
Right, so we did provide a series of negative messages, things that we anticipate would be said in the community, things that, maybe have been heard in the past, themes that really revolve around, if we increase property taxes here, that could be passed on to renters, and then increasing the rent, and there's already high cost of living. The general sentiment, there's just too many taxes in the area. I'm just, tired of being taxed. General distrust of public agencies, questions about budget management, and maybe this money should be coming from developers instead of us out of our pockets.
And did any of your negative messaging contain anything specific to this school district, or was it just general messaging about public agencies, like cost per student or financial history of this particular school district?
I see. Yeah, it was particular to this school district. So, the school district should really step up, learn how to manage its budget better, along those lines.
Can you tell me what the messaging was?
The actual message itself? Yeah. I don't have that in front of me, but I'm happy to pass that along.
Would love to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you go back to the first slide?
Of course. This one?
Yeah. When you frame it as a 12-cent per square foot tax, did you mention that it's in addition to the one that's the 15 cents that's already there, or was it strictly as a standalone?
It was a
tax?
standalone here, yeah. So as you see it written in the gray box on the left, that's how it was offered up to respondents.
So so the respondents were not made aware that this is an additional property tax. It's from the school district, because there's already a parcel tax, so this would be a second one on top.
Right. Well, we don't reference this being a renewal to the past or an extension or anything relative to the past parcel. So we wanted to present it as it would be potentially on the ballot, which in this case is an increase, but those words weren't specifically included in the 75-word ballot question statement.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Member Donahue.
Do you know what some of our surrounding districts pay in parcel taxes compared to our city? Total parcel tax.
I don't actually know the specifics. I know it definitely fluctuates between communities. There's some other districts in the area that have much higher and some much lower. I can't give you those numbers specifically, but what I can say is that when we proposed this one to likely voters in the community, you can see that there was overwhelming support for it.
Scott, I could provide some additional context on this. If you look at properties, if you look at the partial tax rate at $100,000 of assessed value, then compared to nearby districts, we are maybe roughly about a third of the partial tax that is charged in Berkeley, Piedmont, and Albany. I think we're maybe about half of what the parcel tax for Oakland as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any additional clarifying questions? All right. Thank you. We'll open that up for public comment then, if there is any. Seeing none, is there any discussion for this item?
Madam Mayor, we've teed it up so that you could have a discussion of both presentations on your third item. So
Okay,
what we
great.
were thinking was we'd go through both measures, and then the board and the council could have a discussion.
I read agendas like a teleprompter. I didn't even look down. All right, thank you. Let's go move on to 4.2.
Thank you very much.
Literally say anything.
Good evening, members of the City Council and School Board. My name is Emily Goodman. I'm a Senior Vice President at EMC Research, also with Andy. We recently conducted a survey on behalf of the city to measure the feasibility of a potential sales tax measure to fund public safety and early childhood education in the city. Pause for tech moment. All right. So similar to the methodology of the school district poll, we also conducted a mixed mode survey among likely voters in the city of Emeryville. We have a total of 302 interviews, and the margin of error on that is about plus or minus 5.5 percentage points. And the survey was conducted in late October. So a few overall key findings. We have a few more slides, but I won't go into great detail on every single one of them because I think you have them in front of you. And I know obviously we want to save some time for discussion. You don't have them in front of you. Okay, so then I will make sure that you see everything. So we see that sentiment toward city government and city services and things like that are very positive in the city. We see that a potential sales tax to fund public safety and early childhood education is above the 2/3 threshold needed for passage. We tested a special sales tax, which is why it needs the supermajority. And when we test specific elements of what the measure might pay for, priorities and things, public safety, childhood development, things like that really rise to the top. And then we provided additional information both in support of, excellent, and in opposition to the potential measure. And we see support stays strong. It does dip a little bit after we read a series of negative information, and we'll show you that data. So in general, we see that voters in Emeryville are feeling pretty good about the way that the city is going. 53% say that the city is headed in the right direction, compared to just 22% who say that the city's off on the wrong track. We have positive views of the mayor and city council, 47% favorable compared to 19% unfavorable, and about a third of voters didn't have an opinion or neutral, or they hadn't really heard of the mayor and city council, if you can imagine. Likewise, the business community is also perceived very, very positively, 71% favorable compared to 10% unfavorable. When we asked about voters' perception of the need for additional funding for city services, we see that a majority of voters, 53%, perceive a need for additional funding compared to 21% who say that they don't perceive a need for additional funding. Then looking specifically at some ratings of the city, we see very positive across the board. So the quality of fire services, 68% of voters gave the quality of fire services a positive rating. The quality of police services, the quality of life, 76% of voters rate that positively. The quality of city services generally, and then the management of the city budget, 34 to 23 positive to negative, but you can see that big chunk of gray in the middle. A lot of people just don't really have an opinion or can't really rate or aren't really paying attention to how the city manages money. So looking at the support for a potential measure, likewise, you see in the gray boxes the text verbatim that was presented to respondents. We asked about sales tax that would generate $2.2 million. You can see the various things that it would go toward, and we see 73% of voters are in support of the measure today. 26% would vote no. Looking at some city priorities, and these are again things that could potentially go into the measure that it could help pay for. We see protecting the safety of Emeryville residents, maintaining police and emergency services, reducing property crimes and auto burglaries, improving early childhood education, attracting and retaining quality childcare workers. All of these potential priorities are important to at least 2/3 of voters. There are other items that are important too with a little bit less intensity, but you can see that the first couple here are still important to at least 2/3 of voters: safe and nurturing care for children and families, increasing crime prevention programs, and then some of the other items are important to kind of right on the margin of 2/3. Some additional information that we shared in support of the measure. So this is really kind of stuff that focuses on the outcome, less the technical elements of the measure. We see again early childhood education items and public safety again rising to the top and very convincing to voters as a reason to support the measure. And then we see a little bit of solidification in the vote. So the yes, the solid blue, goes up a bit, a few percentage points. So we're still well above the 2/3 threshold needed for passage. And then on the flip side, we did provide some additional information that potential opponents might say, and you can see they're kind of outlined here. They are supported, they're convincing to at least 1/3 of voters. And when you're thinking about a 2/3 measure, every bit counts. So we do see that these are compelling to some voters. And what we see happens to the measure, support is kind of right below the threshold, hovering right around the 2/3 threshold after we provide, a pretty substantial list of potential negative items. So in conclusion, we see that voters perceive a need for funding. They are willing to tax themselves and invest in the community to continue to provide the excellent quality of life that they see in Emeryville and the services as well. And then should you all decide to move forward, which I know is a decision that the council is still considering, we obviously recommend a privately funded campaign effort. So that's it from me. Happy to take questions as well.
Any clarifying questions?
So, is it safe to say that this poll was pretty much presented the same as the districts when it came to whether it was an increase or not?
Yes.
Or if it's a new sales tax?
Exactly, right. So I'll come back to that one slide again so you can see. So we read it, shall the city raise its sales tax to fund X, Y, and Z? So yes, this would be a new tax. It was presented as such.
Okay.
Yeah.
As an increase. Okay, thank you.
On the same slide, looking at the text to the left,
Mm-hmm.
I am noticing that part of the language describes that this would be an increase that would be in place if approved until ended by voters. And I'm wondering, is that common for sales tax increases of this type, or do they typically have a term limit? Is this what we would normally see in a measure of this sort, or is this unusual?
So it's pretty typical to have no sunset, as it's called. We didn't test that specifically, but yes, there are communities all over the state that do sales tax measures that don't have an end date, yeah.
Any additional questions? All right. See none. Thank you.
Okay,
Any
thank
public
you.
comment on this item? Nope. All right, we're going to move on to 4.3, discussion of proposed measures. Who would like to kick off the discussion? Go for it.
I had a quick question for council. How has your decision, in what stage are you in terms of the decision making? Have you decided whether you're going to move forward next year? Have you decided on March or not? I'd love to hear more about that.
At our last council meeting, we gave direction to staff to prepare a resolution and all documents necessary for a March ballot. Correct?
Yes, I can walk through the process if you'd like, Madam Mayor. Would that be helpful?
I think that'd be helpful, yeah.
So at the October 29th special meeting of the City Council, We received direction to prepare the legislation and bring that back on December 3rd to place the measure on the ballot on March 3rd, 2020. That decision has not been made yet because that decision requires the approval of the necessary legislation. In advance of that December 3rd meeting, we also received direction to move forward with producing some informational materials for the community to notify folks that this is under discussion by the council, and those are should be being mailed out the middle of next week. So we're working with the consulting team to prepare those materials in advance of the December 3rd meeting. If the council approves the legislation on December 3rd, then a following set of materials would go out notifying the community that the measure's been placed on the ballot.
It's an extremely tight timeline for March 3rd.
And for reference, we provided in your packets this evening the draft legislation that went to the council for consideration and comment on October 29th.
Member Nguyen, as soon as you're done chewing, it's fine.
Poorly timed, I apologize. Two follow-up questions. One, inspired by our colleague, Member Donahue. How does this bring sales tax locally into alignment with our neighbors? And my second question comes just from a place of being far more familiar with educational funding sources and streams rather than municipal. When I'm thinking about the two target areas that are being described, public safety and early childhood education, what additional funding sources, aside from levying a tax of this nature, exist for those two areas? Like, where does money for police and fire come from?
Our
if not
general
from there?
fund.
Pardon?
It comes from our general fund. So if we were to increase staffing in either of those, we would have to increase our revenues in some way.
So there's not, I guess, let me be more specific. Is there additionally like state funding, federal funding, private funding, anything of that nature? It only is from local measures such as this?
It is possible to get state grants for some emergency services, but we are not currently involved in any of those, nor are we, I think, a community that would be particularly competitive. Member Pats, if you want to jump in here.
So in Alameda County, several cities fund their services through different ways. Some have parcel taxes, some have what we call an additional sales tax. I think that's 2, maybe 3 of the municipalities have the additional sales tax, and others have different funding streams. Emeryville currently has none of those. We rely solely on our share of the property tax, much in the same way. I think 29% of the parcel of the 1% Alameda County property tax goes into education first, and then this county takes them. Eventually, it trickles down to us. So this would be a unique funding stream for Emeryville. We rely heavily on what's called transit occupancy tax, which is the tax we charge our hotel guests in town. Some other cities, Piedmont, Albany, they don't have transit occupancy tax to speak of because they don't have hotels. So this would be a new thing for Emeryville because we don't have those other funding streams.
Our budget is relatively single source compared to other cities. We don't have as diverse of funding streams. You did mention private funding, and I want to make a quick note. Private funding of police departments is extremely rare. The only one in the Bay Area I can think of that aggressively does this is Mountain View with its Google Force and its Facebook Force right now. As a council, that's definitely not something we've talked about, and personally something I'm vehemently opposed to.
Okay, I just want to comment on that in a non-useful way. I really want to see Pixar police and their outfits. Just going to throw that out there.
It's a genius idea.
That's.
And I actually don't know where we stand in terms of sales tax with other cities in the region. Perhaps our city manager.
Oakland's current sales tax is 9.25, as is Emeryville's. However, other cities in Alameda County, Albany, Hayward, Newark,
San
Leandro,
Union City.
9.75. So if the council places this on the ballot and if the voters approve it, that would bring the sales tax in Emeryville to 9.5, which would then be below many cities in Alameda County.
Thank you for clarifying. Member Pats, can you tell me one more time, tell me again the term, the transit occupancy tax?
The hotel tax.
I know, am I getting the term right though, the transit occupancy
Yeah.
tax, that's what it's called?
Transit occupancy?
Transient
Transient.
occupancy
Thank you.
tax.
Transit, we're not talking about taking
Hotel
the bus.
motel tax.
We're talking about, okay,
Hotel
thank you
motel
so much.
tax.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of does speak to the question I was getting at, was as far as like a unique, maybe that's not the right term, like unique funding stream, but something that we have here in Emeryville that that was a really clear explanation. I appreciate it, Member Pats, that like, for example, our neighboring communities, given that we have larger hotels or a greater number of hotels compared to our neighbors, we have that available to us, whereas they don't. So thank you for explaining.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, Oakland has a sizable TOT as well. San Francisco's, I think, is one of the biggest around, isn't it? You know, I'm trying to think, and then, you know, probably San Jose has a TOT, but Hayward has a small one, because even if they had a large one, it's not going to generate any funds. So, but Hayward has the additional sales tax, because they do a lot of retail.
And I just wanted to comment that I'm just hearing City Council, I'm seeing a lot of sort of similarities in the approach that we took as well, where it seems like there was an evaluation of the various revenue sources that were available, and it seems like it was well thought out, similar to ours, in the sense that, to the best of our ability, sort of believe that the I guess the potential measures that were presented today kind of reflect that, meaning what we believe is sort of the best approach for sustainability and to achieve this incremental revenue that we're all looking to increase. So I just want to point that out.
Member Martinez, if someone could please hand her a microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to ask the school board if there are particular programs that you hope to support or fund with your partial tax?
If I may add to the conversation, we've been looking at a parcel tax for over 2 years, and what has been a situation that's occurred in our district, very similar to other districts, is that the cost of living is so high. So what we're looking at is how might we recruit and retain our highly qualified teachers. We've looked at our programming. We've had opportunities that were shared earlier today with regards to STEM programming, with the scientific adventures for girls, for instance, after-school programming that's been available. And those has been pockets. We're really trying to figure out how might we expand our programming with regards to a STEM lens for TK-12. In addition, we're looking at our programs in terms of what will create the college and career readiness. We've seen some success with our test scores. As of late, we've been the highest growth, 8.8% ELA. And so we want to continue with that work in terms of coaching and support, professional development for our teachers as well.
I think Dr. Scott is being slightly modest. To say that we've experienced some growth in our student achievement is an understatement. So to be the district in Alameda County that has the greatest increase in English language arts scores, I think is truly significant, looking at the historical data over the past year, 3 years, and 5 years, you know, from NE8s all the way up through 12th grade. And the thing that I want to just echo is really something that comes from the conversations that we have in the close relationships that we have with our teachers. And that's one of the benefits that we have of being a smaller district, is the conversation. We're all just right here. I am a teacher myself next door in Oakland. And my school is very, very far from 1000 Broadway. I don't have the opportunity to see district level administrators on even an annual basis unless I seek them out. Unlike here, where truly you can go right across the courtyard, and teachers and administrators and family members can all speak together. And so that dialogue is so alive here, where families can express what they want for their students, where teachers can really, the Emeryville Teachers Association has a phrase that they use so frequently, which is that teacher working conditions are student learning conditions, and they want so deeply for their students to have these rich learning conditions, including things like STEM, including the addition of AP courses, multi-year, immersive electives. And we see all around us challenges that districts are having in recruiting and retaining teachers, contract negotiations, bargaining, and what we want for our students are the most qualified teachers who are the most satisfied to be here.
Mayor?
Yes, Member Martinez.
So speaking specifically to retention, is there a plan in place that you'd like to fund?
With regards to retaining our teachers, we have built a lot in terms of building culture, making sure that we recognize our teachers. Just as yesterday we had a celebration to celebrate the accomplishments that they've had. We have surveys that we take with our staff, both certificated and classified, as they leave us, like what are the reasons that they're leaving our district. The highest response is really salary and cost of living. And so there are things that are within our locus of control to try to make sure the culture is inviting, that we support our teachers as best as we can. But we have finite dollars with many needs. And so additional funding will certainly help meet that need that our teachers are communicating to us.
So, sorry, specifically, are you saying that you would increase teacher salaries?
Yes, we would increase teacher salaries to make sure that we're competitive with the surrounding districts, so that we can retain teachers as they are going up in their years of experience and they look at nearby districts. They want to make sure they have competitive wages. And so by increasing wages, we will have the opportunity to do that, as well as getting them the support and professional development also. That helps them in their role as teachers, so that they feel supported. So it's not just salary, but it's also continue with deepening professional development that we hear that our teachers find very helpful in terms of retaining and staying here.
So yes, an important portion of this parcel tax will go to teacher salary and benefits. That quantity or share is to be determined, but we believe one of the reasons for that is that it's actually matches and aligns with the community values the most, as we can see, as we saw from the research. Recruiting and retaining qualified and experienced teachers had the highest top 2-box score among all the items that were assessed. So that definitely matches sort of the needs and what the community is hoping us that we support. So to answer your question, yes, a lot of it will come from.
I have another follow-up question on this item. Where are you in terms of the county with a rank of teacher salaries on average? And secondary to that, you've mentioned cost of living a lot. What's the plan to address that? Are you considering like a subsidy for teacher housing the way San Francisco has done?
We are competitive for first-year teachers. We're not that competitive for tenured teachers. That's the high-level summary.
Yeah. Our specific rank, I would have to get back to you about, but we are below average for the county.
And regarding the cost of living question?
The cost of living, we are definitely taking that into consideration. There has been meetings at the Alameda County of Education with regards to how might districts create housing for teachers, work with their cities, and there's pretty other districts to learn from, such as in Santa Clara and other surrounding areas. But we have not come to that point to have that discussion with the board as of yet, but we're collecting information.
Thank you, Dr. Stroud. That's a great reminder. My understanding is the city passed, I believe past summer, there was a measure around affordable housing. So this may be a good opportunity to ask if sort of kind of like the distribution of those units have those been allocated. We'd love for teachers to be considered to solidify that sort of and solidify the share of, so let's say 5 units or something like that. We'd love to have that type of discussions with City Council.
And I think along those lines, while certainly there are many
Actually,
districts.
let me answer that real quick. So Measure C funds have not yet been allocated, and we are working on developing an expenditure plan with our housing committee. I would love to have the district participate in that. But nobody. What's the timing for that? We just hired a housing person, so this year we will be working on actively creating that plan. But nobody from this side has really gotten a chance to speak yet, and I tend to do the Roberts rules where I recognize everyone first. So would anyone from this side like to hop in on the discussion? Yes, Member Pats.
So I think the ELA growth was good. there's, we're still bottom of the county, and there was not movement. If you want to move towards a STEM school, there was not movement in the math world, which is really the M of STEM. So I think that's kind of a I'm just curious how that, I just want to make sure that's framed in the way that's heard. Coming back around, I think
Could you
there's a
use the
big-
microphone, please? I'm sorry,
Oh,
I'm having
sorry.
trouble hearing everybody.
Sorry, coming back around, I think there's a big difference between the city initiating its first funding stream from the community versus increasing the parcel tax by 75%, which is one of two funding streams that have passed in the last 6 or 7 years for the district. So I think, I don't see them as the same sort of system. I think, and I don't like this particular argument that Councilmember Bowders makes, that the sales tax is actually tends not to be paid by residents. For me, when I look at the burden on the community that we represent, Emeryville is second only to Piedmont in per capita costs. If you look at it as a percentage basis, we very much come below our neighbors, but their funding structures are very different. And so this kind of brings me to my question, which is about sustainability. I think if, we just passed and keep issuing, although I think you finally reached capacity on the bonds for for school buildings, and we had a parcel tax and increased it. It's got to be about 5 years ago. It seems to me, at what point, and in that 5-year span, test scores kind of have stayed flat. At what point is it reasonable, particularly as we keep going and drill down, the parcel tax is not funding. I mean, there's one of the challenges of Emeryville, and one of the things we're doing with that housing bond money and regulations is talking about more and more families in town. But we don't have them now. We have, compared to our neighbors, a very, very low rate of families versus businesses and retail shoppers. So when we talk about public safety, we're aligning the increase in costs and the increased burden with an increase in need. So it brings me to my question of what is sustainable, at what point are we funding? I mean, we're already the highest funded district on a per pupil basis in the county, second only to an elementary district. My data is about a year out of date, so I'm seeing some faces, but we spent, in 17-18, it was $18,000 per pupil versus Berkeley, which I think was around 17. So on a per pupil basis, and again, that doesn't reflect Emory residents. So I think it's a very different, it's apples and oranges. It's very, very different. So that's my thought.
Yes, a question.
Member Collins?
Okay, so frankly, I feel like the growth in our ELA scores is not good. I think it's great, as in any growth when it comes to student learning or student achievement. We've had our scores and our results are showing that we have great support, and it is aligned with the vision of the community to continue supporting our efforts in the changes that we're making within this district. So nothing's going to happen overnight. And in addition to our amazing, when you were talking about the English growth in the scores, we also had the press release where we saved the taxpayers $11 million. So in addition to what the survey is showing us and the polls and the support and the people that's verbally speaking out, we can do much better. And this would be a revenue that would help us to do much better. So it is still a very low parcel tax. I've had many residents, people that work in the school district, people that just work in San Francisco, and when we talk about stuff, they say we have a very low parcel tax. And moving forward, it would be a great idea that the city and the school's vision is aligned in our student achievement, and that we could get your support in our efforts in trying to continue on a successful path. So, because we want more press releases. We want more positive press releases. We want them to talk about what Emory's doing as a community and not just as a school district.
Thank you. Member Collins, Donahue, or Salazar?
So I had a question for the city.
Can we wait until they have had a chance to speak? Because I haven't heard from any of them yet.
Okay.
Any comments from your side? Okay.
May I add
All right. Then I'll go
some
back.
information? Oh, please. No. Go ahead.
So I think that in terms of what it is, I feel like what we're discussing right now are like two different taxes, one for the city, one for the district. They are different, I agree. What I'm hoping for, and to echo what Member Collins was saying, is I would like the conversation to talk about what is it that we are going to do together to invest in our community, be it the school district, be it the city. They are different entities. They do serve different communities, although we are kind of in physically the same area. So I'm curious to know if other members of the council and the board, what their suggestions or feelings or opinions are in terms of collaboration, and what this might look like, given that based on where we sit, we are both responsible, like both bodies are responsible for respecting the community and being responsive to them and being supportive of what it is that they're indicating that their desires are. And I do think that when it comes to test scores, the increase is great. I don't disagree with that. I also think that when it comes to funding, there is the school districts are primarily funded by the state, and that's relatively flat. There's been some increases in the budget recently, but Emory will unlikely be on that list because it's a very small district. And there are other bigger districts like Fresno and Sacramento that, like, when coming to a state level, are really going to get some of that attention. So I really think it's upon us as a city to think about what is it that we're doing to support our students, as well as all of the community members that live here, irrespective of whether or not they have kids. I think that this is something that we can make a mark on together. And so that's what I'm interested in hearing and talking about, is where is it that we can collaborate, and if there are disagreements on how to collaborate, also to lift that up so that we can move towards alignment.
Thank you, Member Salazar. What was your question, Member Collins?
So I just wanted some clarification on the sales tax.
Yeah.
So there was a measure that the city put on the ballot that passed 2 years ago. What's the difference in that passed and what you're trying to pass now?
Are you referring to Measure C or Measure S? All right, so Measure S for Stoner was a cannabis tax only. So that is the only
Okay, so
area to which
wasn't-
that applies.
Yeah, that wasn't the,
Yeah, and Measure C is an affordable housing bond.
okay.
Yes, and Vice Mayor Pats, if you'd like to respond?
Yeah.
So again, I think it's similar to, if you think of it as the bonds that you sell for the building, is similar to what Measure C was, would have been, not Measure K, that was the parcel tax, I forget the letter, that was the ECCL. But those are bonds that can, J? Yeah. So the J bonds can only be used for buildings and maintenance. Same thing with the housing, it can only be used for housing. This is, much like the parcel tax, is a general fund. The sales tax is a general fund. It goes in, we can allocate it as is needed to different city services. And again, I think the way I would frame it is, it's an ongoing tax for providing services versus a one-time cost for capital improvements. And I don't recall the school board being in support of that particular measure. I think that was not endorsed by the school board.
I really appreciated Member Salazar's comments, and I'd like to get to the heart of that real quickly. I think in terms of collaboration, it'd be really helpful for both of us to understand what the other two's plans were. So we've been pretty straightforward. We plan, we've given direction to move forward with March 3rd. We have already started paying for public information to go out on that. what is your plan? Do you plan to definitely go for March, or are you going for the next ballot cycle? And are you ready even to go for March if you were trying to at this point? Yeah. Member Vargas.
We have not decided. We, however, provided direction similar to you to move forward as much as we can until we decide, which potentially could be in the next board meeting, which I believe is November 13th. And so we're making progress on those particular elements. And I'll take this opportunity to have the mic to say that, to me, again, to reiterate, it seems like on top of the revenue sources, it seems like both initiatives are very much aligned with the needs of the community. And just by looking at the survey results, you're basically hitting on the nail as to what the community is asking for us to do. So I feel very positive and comfortable about. I feel good about it. I feel good about what we're both doing on both sides to ensure that we are meeting the needs and the requests of our community.
So I just wanted, I wanted to get a little clarity. So Christian, when you said you don't feel like the school board supported, were you talking about that affordable housing?
Measure C, yeah.
So I was the second signer under the mayor at the time for that, and I did endorse it as the school board president. So just for some clarity.
You endorsed it as an individual.
Christian, sorry, Member Pats, you need to use the microphone.
Right, so I'm
Can you
just
please hand
saying
him
that
the
we
microphone
totally
next one?
supported it. And I was the second signer under the mayor at that time, and that's what was. There was conversation at that time about us putting the parcel tax on the ballot. And in respect for your measures, we decided to wait until 2 years to put our measure on the ballot. And I'm thinking that was kind of clear as far as what was what when it came to the ballot measures. So I was a little surprised when you guys did pop up with the measure for moving forward with November. And I know all that was done like in a couple of weeks versus looking at us and what we were doing. But I'm in total support of anything that's going to make this city better and anything that's going to move this school district forward. So that's where I stand.
So just a point of clarity, you personally supported the measure as a citizen. As a school board president, and the school board itself took no action on endorsing the measure. Those are very distinct things. Just because you were the school board president and you personally supported it, that has no bearing on what the board as a whole decides. You can only speak as an individual. And as far as this happening in a few weeks, that's wholly incorrect. We have been talking about it since May, and we even asked to schedule a meeting in June that the school board did not, I think, either agree to and then canceled or could not agree to, I forget which. City manager, you remember?
I think we could achieve a date where both bodies were available.
Yeah, so well, I don't recall being proposed any dates. I think that we threw out a few. So if this is only happening in the last few weeks, I would say that that's not accurate. We've been planning this for a while and talking about it in public and directly to the school board. We did it at the last city school meetings. We talked about setting up a date. So I think those are things that are just inaccurate.
Any other discussion for this item? Is Dr. Scott asking to be recognized?
I think we kind of have shared quite a bit with regards to why both the city and the school district needs the funding, but I just want to also share, we know across the nation there's the Red for Ed, and that many districts all over the country have been saying that there's a need for funding. We're ranked 36 in the nation in terms of funding that we provide for our students. There is an initiative for full and fair funding that the entire county has been a part of in terms of a coalition that has included school board members, teacher unions, classified unions, parents, students, everyone have been coming together to think about how might we serve our kids. Being a population where we have more than 70% of our students who are on free and reduced lunch, we cannot afford to wait for the state to do the job they need to do. There's a gap of over $2,400 per pupil. And what we saw, I heard about Piedmont. Piedmont just passed two parcels, one to extend their parcel tax that they have given support for over 30 years. And they also have a separate parcel tax with Measure G and H, where they have supported $2.6 million annually to support their students. There's a potential for a divide in terms of the haves and have-nots, and we have to do better for our kids and our community. So I see both interests in thinking about how might we work together so that our community continues to thrive.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. And the coalition you're referring to, is that the Livable California Prop 13 Split Roll Reform Initiative?
No, it's the Bay Area Coalition. It's comprised of districts in the Alameda County, and our superintendent, Moreau, has been leading this work. We're bringing all superintendents, every district together. We just had a meeting this week in terms of how might we message out and get out to our community the needs that we're having. And we're meeting with assembly members, et cetera, in regards to supporting our districts.
Right. And has this body taken a position on the potential ballot initiative for Prop 13 split roll reform, which would greatly increase property tax revenues for districts like this?
What they found is that there is quite a few resistance, and that I'm not sure if anyone has authored in terms of having that go. I'm not sure where it's going to go forward.
The ballot initiative qualified with signatures for 2020.
Yes, but there is a sentiment that, given the history with Prop 13, that may not pass.
Of course. All right. Any other discussion? Member Vargas?
Yes, I just wanted to relay that I think both City Council and the school district should feel very fortunate to represent Emeryville, and be very fortunate that we have had historical support from the community in all of our recent initiatives, and it seems like in the results that we saw today that we are likely to continue to see that support. And while the Emeryville School District has not decided yet on the timing, I did hear from Christian Paz, but we'd love to hear from other City Council members as to whether you would consider collaborating with us on our initiative and supporting us.
Member Donahue? Is that a...
I think we could both go at March and succeed.
I would say that it would make it more difficult for us to both succeed if we both win in March, just in terms of how voters tend to vote on taxes, but it's possible that we can both succeed in March. Is there any other discussion items? Yes, Member Pats.
So, I posed a lot of questions. I didn't actually take a position on the school's parcel tax. I simply had a lot of questions. And I think I go back to Mayor Medina's original question of, we'd like to know more about the plan. I've heard many things, but what I hear is you're still in the first stages. And so I don't have a position until I know what the actual plan is. I didn't hear a lot of how the money would be spent. Again, I go back to Mayor Medina throwing out the idea San Francisco ties the measure directly to the teachers' salaries. Berkeley's teacher union just came to an agreement where their parcel tax money is going to be tied to the salaries. The prior parcel tax had a very explicit no administrative costs on it. This parcel tax sounds to me like that's not the plan at the moment. But again, I don't have an actual plan to look at because you're not there yet. So I just want to clarify that I don't have a position because I don't know your plan. I don't know the thing. I have strong concerns, but I don't have a position.
Thank you. Any other discussion on item 4.3?
I have a question.
Yes?
How likely is it that the November ballot will be so filled with state and county measures asking for funding that we could be in trouble with both if we don't go in March?
The November electorate is typically more progressive, and tends to vote yes on taxes at a higher rate.
True, but still, do you know have any idea about the number of November asks from the county, the state?
Even with the longer ballot, you tend to have a better response in November simply because the demographics of the electorate shift rather dramatically, especially in a presidential year. Yes.
The reason why we have thought about waiting until, rather not waiting until November is because we feel that we need the money urgently. What are your guys' thoughts about March versus November in terms of, why, being that what you just said, why wouldn't you go in November?
We have some tactical reasons to go in March that have nothing to do with the school district in terms of competition from other sources for revenue. That's all I'm going to say on record about that. Any other discussion on this item? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 7:02.